Nkulamusizza, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Safari Mack Returns to Africa. I'm Safari Mack, your guide and host, helping you make connections to the wild. Now, I know you're probably thinking, what did Nkulamusizza mean? Well, here in the African country of Uganda, while English and Swahili are mostly spoken, this is Luganda for hello there. Because today, we are, as I said last week with the hornbill, we are saying goodbye to the open savanna, and we're going to begin our transition into the jungle as we continue heading west. And so, without further ado, I thought I'd like to introduce you to a bird that would make the transition from savanna to jungle a little easier, as they do tend to occupy the similar habitats. The Turaco. This special group, part of a very special Musavijiformes. Oh, here we go. Musavijiformes group. Now these birds. Today we're going to be focusing these birds as a whole and not just one specific species. But before we begin, if you're new to my channel, hit that like and subscribe button. Check out my Facebook page for content on conservation. And if you have a question about animals or if there's an animal request that you have for the future, you just have to send me an email, which you will always find the link to down in the description below. But if you're ready, let's get to it. Now, the evolution is pretty unusual, and I know I've said this with all my animals, but here's how unusual it is for this bird. So, picture yourself on the planet 52 million years ago. It's been now, at this point, it'd be 13 million years since dinosaurs disappeared from the planet. Now, you might think it went straight from lush and tropical to starting to become the coldest, right? The Ice Age? No. That wouldn't be for millions of years. Instead, the world was once covered in lush tropical rainforest, and it was on every single continent, from the Arctic all the way down to Antarctica, including North America, where it's surprising to learn that that some of the early fossils of Turacos, at least the ancestors, we'll call it, of modern-day Turacos, actually was dug up near what we know as present-day Wyoming. So imagine what Wyoming must have looked like with the tropical rainforest district. Now, today, the modern-day Turaco comes in at least 23 different species, from the largest being this guy, the great blue Turaco, to the smallest being the white-crested Turaco. Now, just if you wanted to know exactly how people have identified these birds, these have been known as banana eaters, or they're also known as go-away birds or lories. I know it's kind of hard to follow, but this is just what I've learned, thankfully, from doing some good research. Now, for their habitat, lifestyle, and their nesting. As you could guess, the Turaco as a whole is found only on the continent of Africa. They manage to live in a variety of different habitats, from coastal forests, rainforest district, open grassy plains, open woodlands, and forest and wooded savannas, where you can find many different kinds, and it really depends on what their habitat shows. Now, in terms of their social life, they do tend to live, they can travel in groups of 30, but usually smaller groups are comprised from 6 to 10 birds at a time. Now, during the breeding season, though, they will break away from the flocks and will become highly territorial as they prepare to begin constructing their nesting sites. But before we get into their nesting sites, take a look at these feet. Pretty cool, huh? Is there another bird that makes you think of this? For me, these feet are somewhat resemblant to that of macaws or parrots. That's because these birds, the Turaco, are known to have what you would call zygodactyl feet. Meaning, unlike most birds where they have 3 in the front and that 1 in the back, instead, they have 2 in the front and 2 in the back, which makes them perfectly adapted for life up in the trees. That's right. These birds are what you would call arboreal, meaning they like to spend most of their time up in the treetops, where they run along the tree branches and are known to be some are known to be notoriously poor flyers. Now, when it comes to the breeding season, mom and dad will build these large, loose, and often flimsy-like platforms where the female lays around 2 to 3 eggs at a time, and both mom and dad will take turns in incubating the eggs until they hatch. Now, when they do hatch, it's usually 18 to 19 days later that these birds will begin their journey going across tree branches looking for food. Speaking of food, let's see what's on the menu. These birds, as I said, they are known as what you would call banana eaters. So these birds are highly frugivorous. Forgive me if that's not the way to say it, but in short, they basically eat fruit. And I mean a lot of fruit. Fruit, leafy greens, flowers, leaves, whatever they can find up in the treetops. But they do not. But do they eat insect? Do they eat protein? Yes, but not in the greatest quantity like other birds would, like a chicken or a raven. No. These birds have to eat more fruit than protein so that bodies can function, because they are known to have an iron storage disease called hemochromatosis, which means that for people that keep these birds in human care, such as zoos or aviaries, they have to have these birds on a low iron diet so that they can keep their health in good shape. Now, another interesting thing about these birds is that there's one spot, which the arrow is pointing to this bird here. There's a place in the bird called the crop. This is where birds often store their food when they're bringing it back to their offspring. But Turacos don't have that. And another pretty wild thing, these birds are known to actually chew their food. They actually will chew it. So because they don't have a crop, and because they chew, they have to use their tongue to kind of push their food back to the throat so that it can be later digested. Now, to finish up for today's episode, we're going to talk about their influence, the wild things, and of course their conservation status. Now, before I get into the others, I want to explain something. These birds have actually, despite us, because of their beauty, they've actually been featured a lot in kings' menageries, even the menageries like those of a sultan in the Middle East. These birds have been highly prized because they really do have a beautiful, striking appearance, as you have already seen from the others that we have seen so far in this episode. But what else is influential about them in human culture? Their feathers. In some African cultures, the chiefs of villages will actually use the Turaco feathers to kind of put on like a crest, kind of like a hat, so as to symbolize who is in charge. But there's more than just that. The Turaco is actually very unique among all birds, as it has a copper-based pigment that helps give its feathers a vivid green and red hues that really cannot be found anywhere else on birds. Another interesting thing about the hatchlings, remember how I said not too long after hatching, 18 to 19 days, they start climbing? One way that helps them, not just their feet alone, on their wings, they have a kind of claw that helps them to grip onto the branches and make their way through the canopy of their homes. So now, thankfully, these birds are not considered to be endangered, but there are some that are getting close to becoming endangered, because these birds, sadly, are losing their habitat due to human expansion. So that's why we need to do what we can to help protect these birds from extinction by studying them and building up human care breeding populations. Now, that's it for this episode, but join me next week as we fully immerse ourselves in the jungle by taking a stroll with the African forest elephant. But until next week, this is Safari Mack. I'll see you all out there.